Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Today, my dear friends, I'd like to speak again about President Putin and his ideas of the world and Russia's place in it. A couple of days ago, I posted a video which was a part of that conversation, but focused on Ukraine. And it was devoted to a letter that Zelensky wrote to Putin. And I called that video Arrogance or um, and confidence. This is about the relations between the two leaders and what Russia is going to do next in the war in Ukraine. But I want to leave all this aside and focus on what seems to be a much more important for Putin um, view of where Russia is and how he sees its future role in the world. So let's just break it down into several important issues that Putin raised in his remarks. And I broke it down, even though he spoke at different times and answering different questions and in his own agenda, in his own speech. But I sort of broke it down into several major core issues. And aside from the war in Ukraine, which basically I want to summarize, he said that there will be no negotiations with those who perpetrate attacks on civilians. This is over, finished. There are no talks to Zelensky. It is now referred to Russia as the terrorist regime, and Russia would pursue its goals of demilitarization, denazification, and those declared in June 2024 as far as territories are concerned, and that would be on the battlefield. So let's just leave that aside. Aside from Ukraine, the most important issues would be relations with the United States, relations with Europe, and relations with the rest of the world or with the global south. Now, in the Western media discussion, it is presented in that order because this is what's most important for the Western audience: relations with Europe, relations with the United States, and then the rest of the world. What needs to be emphasized is that for Vladimir Putin, it is the other way around. The last priority for him is Europe, and the first priority is the global south and BRICS. So let me just familiarize you with his expose of where things stand in this sphere, in this set of issues. What Putin said in his words is basically a repetition of what he had said many times before, that the BRICS countries are developing faster, that the rate of growth is 4%, and the Europeans and Americans like 1%. He also said that the GDP of the BRICS countries is 40% of the world, whereas the G7 countries is I believe 17, and then just went on in the statistics. All that is quite known. What is new in his remarks is that the not only the GDP is growing, but that's where the action is in terms of innovation, in terms of where the action is, where industry is growing. It is, of course, with BRICS. And even if there are now issues with BRICS, when two members of BRICS, Iran and Emirates, are fighting each other, that still doesn't change the fact that the innovation, the newest technologies are slowly moving east. And that is, he mentioned that India is now number one in programming. China is now number one in a whole set of issues, from energy production to chips and computers and sophisticated technology that used to be made only in Europe or the United States. So I think that is what's important for Putin is that he sees that Russia is well respected and has a well-deserved space inside this new technological drive. He also criticized the West and the United States specifically in saying that when it suited the West, they promoted free trade and WTO, World Trade Organization, and they were reducing tariffs, and they were trying to convince the whole world that the future is in open trade and open movement of goods and services and people, and that was supposed to be a virtue. Now, when it turned around now, when it is Western commodities cannot compete with the Chinese ones, or for in some areas with the Russian ones, they just block them from the market by artificial tariffs and sanctions and outright theft. He talked about the frozen Russian assets, which are stolen Russian assets in European banks. And his argument was that it only hurt them more than it hurt Russia, because the global South countries began to having second thoughts about investing their money in Western institutions. He cited a figure that the European Union lost potentially over $1 trillion euros in its trade with Russia because of the sanctions, which essentially hurt the European Union more than they hurt Russia, because Russia found new markets for its products and the Europeans didn't. When they quit the Russian market, they simply lost the share of the revenue, and all their places were eagerly taken up by the Chinese companies, mostly Chinese, but some Indian and Indonesian and other ones. So essentially, the let's say car market in America that was in Russia that was German dominated before 2022, well, now it's 60% China dominated, and that goes in many other fields. So in other words, his argument was that the Europeans hurt themselves. Now that brings the question of relations with Europe and the way he put it. Europe is escalating according to everyone, including Putin, and it is raising the stakes all the time by providing more sophisticated weapons to Ukraine, especially drones. Now, some arguments are made by American and other observers that eventually Putin will strike back, that it is perceived as weakness, that Russia cannot forever take on the blows delivered by the West Europeans, and therefore there will be a blowback. What I'd like to explain on this issue is that it's not going to happen, and this is what I understand Putin means. It is not certainly weakness. Russia has the capacity to wipe out, as he put it, if need be, anybody who tries to touch Kaliningrad or Russian anti-air defense system or anything, any other strategic weapons systems. What Putin is trying to say and to communicate, mostly not to the governments but to the people of Europe, is that Russia is not a threat. Russia has no interest whatsoever to attack Europe. And the reason he's trying so much to convey that message is because he does not want to play into the script that von der Leyen and Kallas and other warmongers are promoting, that Russia is an aggressor, Russia is going to attack Europe. Now, suppose if he did strike some facility that produces drones, that would be exactly what they want him to do, to prove that Russia is an aggressor, that Russia is striking back. So his strategy is not to strike back and to take on the blow for a while, unless there is a certain danger of a strategic harm done. At this moment, the way he reasons it, Ukrainian drone strikes are painful like a mosquito bite, but they really add up to nothing because it's a nice photo opportunity to see a black smoke rising over St. Petersburg, but it really is nothing. It's just a container of oil that is burning. Now, what damage is it? None. It would be repaired in a day or two. And then he said that the Russian drone defense capability is growing and they will find a way to stop those drones. Moreover, I should add for myself, nobody has this capability. I'm sure if a drone flew over Berlin, nobody would know what to do with it and how to stop it because it's just a new kind of technology that has never been tried on a massive scale before, and nobody is ready for it. So he just dismissed it and said, well, it doesn't make any difference. We will deal with it if it is a matter of serious concern. Now, about Europe, also, what is important for Putin and to explain why he acts the way he is that he does hope that there are winds of change coming in Europe. And I checked whether his expectations have any foundation. And it is indeed interesting that if you or any one of you open up Google and check on the political trends in Germany, you would see that the Alternative for Germany party, AfD, is running as the biggest political party in Germany today. That Merz's popularity is down to single digits. And that the popularity of AfD is growing to be more than 30% in West German lands or provinces, and it is 45% in East German provinces. In other words, AfD is likely to participate in government or head the government in German elections, unless they ban it. And if they do ban it, there may be a serious upheaval, a social upheaval in Germany that nobody is aware what consequences would be. Now, and as it is well known, AfD is for restoring pipelines, restoring normal relations with Russia, and even German representatives for the first time in 4 years attended St. Petersburg Forum this time around. And Putin said that the companies that stayed are welcome to stay, and those that return are welcome to return. But then what they've given up and abandoned is not going to go back to them. They will have to start from scratch if they want to do business in Russia. In other words, Putin's expectation is that in France, in Germany, and in Italy, and in Greece, and in Spain, there's no hostility to Russia from the people and the publics. And therefore, the hostile governments, such as Macron and Starmer and Merz, they should look at themselves, at their standing in their own countries, and their standing is miserable, all three of those. And so their outward support for Zelensky and for outwardly very hostile attitude to Russia is something that Putin regards as passing. Now, another important topic in the discussion came up about the United States. And again, Putin spoke very, very politely about Trump and about his efforts to finish the war in Ukraine and have a compromise and all this. Now, people, of course, have been asking me a lot, and generally the question is in the air, why is Putin so careful about Trump? Doesn't he see Maduro? Doesn't he see threats on Cuba? Doesn't he see American aggression against Iran? Yes, he does. He spoke very, very openly about Iran and about supporting Iran and about the aggression in the Middle East, all of this. He definitely is aware of all this, and Russia is clearly on the side of Iran. However, he wants to help Trump extricate himself from the impasse he found himself guided by Netanyahu in this silly war against Iran. He wants to help him because he wants to encourage Trump's drift away from NATO, away from confrontation with Russia, into a possible area of joint projects, trade, and normal relations. He still wants to encourage that. And, from Putin's point of view, what is there to gain by antagonizing people and by provoking people and by, threats and other kinds of things? His method is different. He still hopes that a deal with Trump may come about, maybe after November, because he would be free there. If he loses the majority to the Democrats, he would be free to do whatever he wants in foreign policy because they cannot control that. If he wins, he would be even more empowered to move on and more energetically in settling the war in Ukraine and the one in Iran as well. So this is where Putin, how to explain his issues with Trump. Now, on domestic affairs in Russia, it's very, very interesting what he said too. There are a lot of reports that the supposedly discontent growing in Russia, that the oligarchs are just about to overthrow him. All these narratives, always launched by this comedian on drugs, Zelensky. No, none of that is true. There's no upheaval in Russia, nothing, zero. Forget about it. What there is inflation. And there were measures taken to curb inflation, and that is what they were trying to do in 2025, is to cool the economy. The cool meaning that there's a lot of military motivated production which cannot be easily reversed once there's no need to produce so many missiles and tanks, which essentially means that, as Putin said it, the end is in sight. In other words, he's already thinking of Russian economy after the war, when there's no need to maximize military production. And they're trying to diversify the economy, curb down the inflation, and increase the relative weight of the civilian sector. And of course, now it is much easier to do with the additional revenue that is coming to Russia because of rising oil prices. On oil prices, he also spoke very, very warmly about Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and the friends in the Middle East. And he truly positioned himself as a kind of a mediator between Iran and the Gulf countries, that he's trying, and Trump, in order to find a formula for a peaceful resolution. And I think he can play a very positive role because he's the only one who can speak as a friend to Iranians and persuade them not to be hostile automatically to any initiative that comes from the United States or from the Middle East. So there again, he's trying to play a positive role. And finally, let me just say a few words about the media and the press. That I made an effort and checked how his speech and his remarks were perceived in India and China and Tanzania and South Africa and Brazil and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states and Al Jazeera and Iran, and they were all extremely positive. At some points, so positive, then one could wonder, why is Putin so popular? This is totally unknown in the West because nobody in the West bothers to read, or do a survey of the press in Tanzania or in Brazil. The West is so focused on itself that it doesn't think that what it matters what is going on in the global South. But let me just remind you, my dear viewers in the West, Putin is a hero in the global South. Many perceive him as one of the leaders of the world, with tremendous respect and tremendous support that he gets in the global South. And of course, 130 countries came to St. Petersburg Forum, which is, proof that Russia is not isolated, that demonization of Putin by the West does not work, and that indeed he is seen as one of the great leaders of our times. Thank you very much, and this is it for today. I want to remind you they have many playlists. Many of them are historical. There's a huge playlist of history of Europe, and history of Russia, and history of the Soviet Union, and of course the war on Ukraine is a separate list, and this one, Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. And I want to remind you too that my book, From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin, this is the one you see on the screen, is coming out in Portuguese later this year in Brazil. Thank you and goodbye.